My name is Will. I'm a Voices for Care member, and I have been a Voices for Care member for 2 years. The reason I signed up was it was kind of twofold, I suppose. I saw a flyer on a notice board, and at the same time, that kind of coincided with me trying to access palliative care for a relative, my sister, who was very unwell at the time, and I thought she would benefit, or I thought it was really necessary. So I went on that journey, and that journey ended when I was informed that it really had nothing to do with me, that it was a clinical decision. So I suppose it was a clinical decision. And so I threw myself into the Voices for Care. So that's why I'm here. When I joined up 2 years ago, and little did I think I'd be sitting in a room full of people. Yikes. It's a bit of a shocker, but no, I'm delighted to be here. It's been very inspiring this morning and enlightening listening to all the talkers. So now I'm just going to introduce Janet. Would you like to say a few words about yourself?
Yes. Yeah. So hi everyone, I'm Janet Diffin. I currently work as a Senior Programme Manager in Health and Social Care Research and Development in Northern Ireland, and essentially we look after the budget for all things research and development from our own Department of Health, and I suppose our aim is to help support good quality research happen in Northern Ireland. One aspect of that role has been supporting personal and public involvement, as we refer to it in Northern Ireland, and sort of helping support researchers with that. And in a previous life, I did work as a researcher for many years in the area of palliative care research on projects with family carers and young people with life-limiting conditions, and had a brief stint working with Hospice UK as well. So I suppose I'll bring reflections perhaps from all of that through our discussions today.
Thanks, Janet. And Mary.
Hello everyone, my name is Mary Nevin, and I'm an assistant professor of nursing in Dublin City University, and I'm also a clinician. I work as a night nurse with the Irish Cancer Society and as a science teacher.
Oh, thanks a million, Mary. I was just on reflection of all the things that have happened this morning and stuff. I'm just going to, rather than dilly-dally, I'm going to dive straight in, Mary. Mm-hmm. And I'm just going to ask you, like, how long have you been involved with patient-public involvement in your projects and your research, and why did you get involved in that?
Well, I suppose certainly from pre-doctoral stage in my doctoral thesis, there was always some kind of patient-public involvement in it, and I think it was related to impact. Certainly impact from the results. But postdoctorally, working as a researcher, I think the landscape for looking for funding was very much changing, and the emphasis on having public and patient involvement so that the results are meaningful and demonstrate impact and value in health services provision. I think that was the main driver, and I think from my perspective, wearing two hats and being a clinician and going after projects that were impactful, I think looking at having that voice and having those values within the project design and within the project outcomes was a huge driver for me.
Yeah, and would you say that your experience to date has been a positive one, or is it?
Yeah, it most definitely has. So my most recent project, we're just finished collecting data. It's a full study looking at generalist palliative care within oncology services and hospital care provision. The calls come out and sometimes you don't have much time to prepare, so looking at finding a voice of someone who was affected by cancer. I was very fortunate that we have that repository within the All Ireland Institute, the Voices for Care Network. Mm-hmm. So I was able to approach the Institute and send in an application form to see, the type of person that I wanted involved in the project. And that's an important consideration, when you want someone to be involved in your project and collaborate and contribute, it's important to think about what you need from someone. So from my perspective, I need someone who was, experienced in the receipt or family member receiving cancer care in a hospital setting. And I wanted them to be in some way computer literate because we designed the project code-proof. So most of our meetings were via Zoom and online. So some basic level of computer knowledge was important. And so I was able to send in that, and it was reviewed in the Honor Institute. I got some names, and we discussed, potential opportunities. So the person who eventually came on board, honestly, the relationship has been fantastic. The impact has been beyond what I could have imagined when I designed the project. And what I mean by that is, this person who's very articulate and experienced, we looked at the project materials. She's reviewed all the data. She's reviewed the language. She attends all our meetings, and we have a collaboration in this project. So there's clinicians, academics from various backgrounds, and that value and that voice in these meetings is really important for our project. We've also managed to hold a workshop that I didn't realise, but she's very well networked with the Widows Group in Ireland. So she led a workshop, a PPI workshop, and we both co-facilitated it about the experiences of families going through cancer care in hospitals. And I've also managed she's also presented to my third year students, 140 students. She has presented to on her experiences of being a family member going through cancer care provision in hospital. There was plenty of critique and negatives, some positives as well, but it was really good for our careers moving into internship, hearing about, care when it doesn't go well. We like to think we're doing a good job, but on the other end, hearing when it doesn't go well and the impact that it has on people. So that's been really useful. So the outputs are beyond the scope of the project, and it's been very good.
Oh, that's brilliant to hear, Mary. That really, really is. Just listening to you there talking, I'm kind of minded of, and just from my own personal experience too, I've been involved with people and groups similar to that, with Voices for Care members, that I've often noticed, like, that I'm going to direct this to you now, Janet, that sometimes like there's a vulnerability to people and patients that are involved, been asked to be involved in research. Some of them are suffering trauma, some of them are still going through bereavement and stuff like that. How do you deal with that? Like?
I think it's a conversation we're having more and more as public involvement becomes sort of more expected and maybe more of a requirement. We don't want, I suppose, people to be unleashed and not have that sort of consideration that people might be recounting things that are traumatic or things that evoke strong feelings, and it's about that training and support both for researchers but also for public contributors, and being mindful of all the practicalities around that can help somebody. Maybe a pre-brief before you're going into meetings to discuss how they are, if they're okay with things, maybe a debrief after, and that'll probably become second nature to a lot of people in here who's working clinically. But it's just ensuring that we don't need ethics to do the public involvement, but we need to do it in an ethical way as we would if there were research participants.
Okay, so there is ethical approval required for the
if
research.
You're a research participant, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
But for the public.
Yeah, you can go
Okay.
and talk with your public involvement contributors, but it's just being mindful that we're doing that in a sensitive way, I suppose, and recognising that people might be recounting something that is can be quite traumatic depending on the project.
And then you mentioned on the funding that that it's now is it becoming a prerequisite. Like, to me now I don't know, when I heard that first I kind of went, oh, is that a good thing or a bad thing that it's there? I don't know, what do you feel about that?
I mean, I think that is a debate, because what you want to avoid, when everybody wants to avoid, is this becoming a tick box or something that's tokenistic. Oh, I have to get this done to get my funding, and that's not the intention of it being, I suppose, a prerequisite. And I think for us, we reflected on, sometimes funding is scarce, resources are scarce, that's the reality of it, and we want to be funding research that's meaningful to people. The most meaningful research that we can, and one aspect of helping that is having good quality public involvement shape that. And I suppose there's other things, in the UK we have the UK standards for public involvement that are designed to help researchers do this all well. We offer training as well to researchers, and I have one-to-one sessions with researchers to help them shape their applications and things. So it's at two levels. Yes, we're requiring it and other funders require it, but we do have that training and support around it to make sure that it's not that tick box.
So it just doesn't become.
It just doesn't become another thing.
We need to fill this
We
in,
want
so
people to understand the
go grab
benefits
two
of it.
people off the street and put them
absolutely.
and stick them in there.
Mm.
But I think as well, the landscape has changed. Funders can spot it a mile away. If there's tokenistic, it's just written in as a tokenistic gesture. I mean, the funding that I got for this study, there was a PPI contributor who was part of the funding body and separately reviewed my application from that perspective. So, it is very much critiqued from that perspective. And it's not relevant for every potential step of your research process, of course, but if it's done, it should be done in a meaningful way beyond participation. They're not research participants. It should be, the concept of involvement and collaboration, really. And this, I suppose I wear two hats, and in some ways I was very much looking at this clinically focused. And in some ways I think we do have a little bit of a reductionist approach as clinicians. We think we do know what patients want, we do know what families want, we're very experienced in communicating and knowing their needs. But I think from having that involvement in my research, I'm seeing massive value added through that voice that's always there at all the meetings. That critical friend, poking, prodding, is this voice there throughout. So, from that perspective, it's been really useful. And in saying that, I wasn't that necessarily skilled in having the PPI contributor in research, so I had to go in for some supports for that. And there's a great network, PPI Ignite, and it's a national network, and we're looking at DCU as a partner side of PPI, and they've excellent resources, and they reviewed my application as well, and I know they provide resources throughout the country for that. So there's loads of resources to support PPI implementation.
Sometimes, within my involvement, which is, I suppose, limited, but I detect. Now I'm going to put this out there. I detect a kind of a friction between the clinical and the academic kind of world. Is PPI something that can help that to kind of come together, or is that just a pie in the sky from my own perspective?
I suppose from my own experience, it's certainly been the glue with my project, because we have collaborations with clinicians and academics and a research site, and we have that voice in the middle that is connecting all those perspectives. So before she even joined the project, there was discussions around meaningful involvement of this person, our culture, our values in the meetings.
And is that from the get-go? Is it?
Yeah,
Does that
absolutely.
happen when you're designing the project, or?
It can do.
Okay.
And we
Sorry.
didn't have that person involved at design, but once the project took off and we recruited her voice speaker, she was there. But before she came on board, we did have a meeting where we discussed, the culture and the values of the project, and this person will be involved throughout, and the expectations and that. And I think that's very important as well. Because there's logistical challenges, and there's no doubt. It does take more time. It absolutely does, because I want to set out meetings and I want to set agendas early. I did some training with Zoom with this person to make sure she was ready. Joining early, discussing it early. Debriefing after meetings with her, meeting her physically when all the meetings are over Zoom. Developing that rapport and that relationship is really important, and maintaining it. And then just, logistical challenges, remuneration. In DCU we have, like all universities, we have very robust and strict auditing practices, so trying to set this person up as a preferred supplier, who's a private individual and not a company, our documentation didn't support that. So trying to pay her in different ways and just managing logistics, we're actually trying to critique that through the PPI network now to make that easier.
I think that's important to reflect on, though, and it does require resource, and that's important to have that open conversation, because we do need to, I suppose, remind people that if we can get more funding for things like PPI. So we do have a PPI research small grant scheme in R&D division, whereby researchers can come to us and get a smaller pot of money to help them do set up maybe a public involvement advisory group to help them shape applications that they're going to submit and things. So it's a small pot of money to get things going, but I think it's important to recognise.
I think it's essential. I mean,
That-
the
And is that
time
a similar thing down south? Because does that exist here as well? That little pot of money?
I mean,
The important pot of money.
It's about budgeting, that
Yeah.
involvement in
Yeah.
when you're submitting, but there are frameworks, again, the PPI Ignite shows a framework, it's developed in the UK, of how you would typically remunerate someone from the public who's going to be involved in a project, ways to remunerate and things like that. So there is guidance there around how to do that.
I'm hearing really a lot of positive things coming back from your experience with, PPI. And I have to say that my experience, although it's been kind of daunting at times, has been fairly positive too, I have to say. Is there any kind of pitfalls that you see, or?
That's a great question, because we do often reflect on impact. We do skip straight to talking about all the positives.
Yeah.
I
We
suppose,
won't end on the
I
we won't end on the
suppose
negatives.
I suppose when I reflect back to days in research, it's very much just ensuring you have that sort of expectation management, that everybody's clear on what everyone else is doing, and having those open conversations, and recognising that it's a two-way relationship. It's a two-way thing. It's not just someone there to help you with your research. You're there to help them get something out of that too. So I suppose that's one way to avoid some possible. I didn't have any issues personally, but it is just being mindful of that it's a two-way process.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is around communication and expectations. For example, I sent out one review or one version of the survey for review, and everybody was copied on the email. But I forgot that I wasn't expecting this person to be reviewing it, from a theory perspective. But she came back and I didn't have much to offer there. And I said, that's my fault. I should have contacted you separately and said, look,
Okay.
I don't, what I would like from you is to look at it in these terms, So clear communication and expectation, I suppose, being very aware that there's a burden in participating and collaborating, and people feel that weight. And I think this person definitely, I think at times she felt she had to be the voice of the patient in this for all patients, and I was trying to remind them that that's not your burden. That this is what we expect, and this is what you can contribute. So, just that communication piece is so important.
Brilliant. Now, Mary, are you waving in my direction? And that's quite all right. Shall I just give you a quick wave back? I'm enjoying this somewhat. We might continue on for another 5 minutes. No, we can wrap it up there now. Listen, I'd just like to thank you so much. This has been really, really enlightening. I'm really inspired when I speak to people like to Janet and Mary. It's really, really good. Gives me hope anyway. So thank you very much.